Hey, shalom, shalom. Sister Kate here. It's a very hot afternoon, and I've spent the morning doing some work out on our property, and so I'm just waiting for it to cool down, and I thought I would do a live stream. And I put Basic Torah on there because if anybody had any questions, I got, you guys gave me pretty good feedback on my video on Basic Torah, and especially with a feast coming. Shalom, Truth Faction, shalom. With a feast coming up, often the Holy Spirit is moving people, is spurring people. And so if you have questions, here I am. McDougal's Bride. Hey, shalom, Sister Harriet. How are you? Always good to see you and hear from you. And I get all your comments. The music, well, shalom. Denise Becker, shalom. I get all your comments and your positives. So thank you so much, Harriet. And I hope you're okay. I don't know what you're going to do for Sukkot. I hope you're able to do something for it. I know it won't be easy if you're still in gutter. Is it gutter where you're working, or I may have forgotten. Shalom. Let's see who else is on here. Truth Faction. Lone Star Living. Hey, shalom. How are you? From Cubicle Land. Oh, that's not a whole lot of fun. I liked your videos, brother. Yeah, I'm well. Okay, so questions about Basic Torah, if you have any. I'm sure if you're sort of mainstream Christianity, you've heard all these horrible things about people going into legalism and everything else, and I can dissuade you from those opinions as well. Yes, that's my struggle for now about the feast. Okay, so Sister Harriet, we'll just talk to you for a minute about it. You do the best you can. Now, I know you're in an area that's going to be hot, and there's probably not going to be a lot of believers. But you can, if you have to, just keep the feast yourself. And our daughter was at school, and she actually researched, could you put a tent up out on the ground? Could she have a tent in her dorm area? And basically hey, hummingbirds, always hanging out. Basically the school said, no, we don't want anybody setting up tents. We don't want anyone staying in tents. So she wound up spending several nights in her pickup truck because she had a little cap on it, and so she would sleep in her pickup truck. So she was in a temporary dwelling. And so for you, Sister Harriet, if you have like an apartment or something, or you have maybe a balcony on it, you could just set up a tent or some kind of temporary shelter and sleep in that. And the other thing about Sukkot is it's the end of the season harvest. It's also a precursor to the return of Yeshua, and it's a happy time. Like if you're not able to go somewhere where you can spend Sukkot, the word says where the Father has put his name, which would have been the temple. But let's just say you can't travel anywhere. You're allowed to take whatever offerings you had and turn them into money and then buy things for yourself. And it talks about things that your heart desires, or strong liquor. So it is meant to be sort of a party. And one of the things that it talks about in Leviticus on the first day of this feast is having some kind of parade where you get willow boughs and palm fronds and you march around and you praise the Lord. So it's a really simple. We have always seen in this holiday the beginnings, the precursors of camping in the fall, because that's basically what this holiday is doing. You are in a temporary dwelling and you are cooking out over a fire, and it's almost, well, the holiday comes after the Israelites leave Egypt, so you are sort of like on the move, and you're supposed to be hospitable. You're supposed to, invite people over and share your food with them, and good thing to do would be read through scripture and so on like that. All right, let me see your comments here. Michael Ryan, shalom. We set up tents in the front yard for a few years. Exactly. Our first Sukkot, we didn't know what we were doing. So we built a Sukkah out of pallets in our front yard. and decorated it with things that we had harvested from the garden, like green beans that I canned and jam I had made, and some flowers like the chrysanthemums and the sunflowers right now are blooming. And then we put a picnic table inside, and then we invited people over to eat, and we would have meals. And some nights my son would be like, "You have to do something fancy." We had peanut butter and jelly, but other nights, we'd get the grill out and we'd cook out over the grill. If you look online, you'll see pictures and videos of people's sukkahs, which is their temporary dwelling, and they'll have those little lights around them. A lot of times when we build a sukkah, it's just from poles that we cut down on the property, and we lash them together with things like baling twine, so it forms, sort of a square. And then we hang things off of that, and that's what you can sit under when you're gathering and sharing with other people. And there is a movie online that I tell people, I've heard of Rob Skiba, but who's Nathan Reynolds? Lena. Okay. Rob Skiba, it's a K. Skiba, Skiba, not Skiba. Nathan Reynolds is he's a person who says he is from the Reynolds family, the Reynolds rap Reynolds family. And he has been in, their family is, like some people have these conspiracy theories about certain families in the world, like Queen Elizabeth is related to a bunch of people, and the Bushes are related to her, and supposedly, even Barack Obama was a great cousin of Queen Elizabeth or something. He claims that the Reynolds family is one of those great families that's been around since the 1860s, building their financial empire, making aluminum, aluminum foil, everybody uses it, and that they have a very dark side, and that they have sold their soul to the devil in order to get rich and famous. And he makes claims that all these very rich families, powerful families, are all in that kind of lifestyle together. And I heard Rob Skiba did an interview with him because he wrote a book. And I think the book's called Snatched from the Flames. So Pastor was listening to the interview, and I was listening with him. And several things about it struck me, the interview. One was the timing of it. Excuse me, because I'm close to 60 years old, and I can't in my memory remember very often hearing about rich and famous people actually being charged with crimes that are similar to what Nathan Reynolds talks about them doing. And I'm talking about Jeffrey Epstein. It's very seldom that nationally you hear about things like that. And just off the top of my head, we think about the Clintons and the accusations that Bill Clinton, had all these affairs, and that Hillary had affairs, and people who were related to them, business partners and political friends and stuff disappeared. Like, if you go online, there's like a list of 270, 130 names of people who died while the Clintons were going from the governors of Arkansas to the presidency. And then there's the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal, and roll that back to the Kennedys, and JFK was having all sorts of affairs in the White House, and roll it back even further. You get to that whole thing with Mary Jo Kopechne, where they're young and they're drunk, and they crash their car, and she's in the car with them, and they get out, the Kennedys do, Edward and I think John, get out and leave her in there, and she drowns. And they just walk home, and they don't really report it to the police right away or anything. And Laura Bush, as a young woman, was drunk and struck somebody, some kind of accident, and killed a person. And so there's that. There's those things that, kind of bubble up and then disappear, and bubble up and disappear. But it's not very often, and I probably should do an internet research on this, a Google search on it, where people like Jeffrey Epstein, who's super, super, super rich and has his own plane and has his own island, is charged, arrested and charged with trafficking in young women. And the first charge against him was in Florida. I've heard of, okay. Occult sacrifices, Brother Matt says. Now, there is a whole, right? There's a whole group of people who have talked about this, the satanic rituals and so on. There was a daycare place in California, and they were charged with those things. They were charged with abusing the children while they were at daycare. So this stuff happens too. You know, it comes up and then it disappears. It comes up and then it disappears. There are whole ministries that are based on, you know, helping survivors of this occult abuse. And people write books about, you know, they were in it, their family was in it, they were abused, or they witnessed abuse or whatever. So Jeffrey Epstein, he pops up, right? And he gets a lot of social media attention quickly. Just Dano, hey, peace, people. Hey, Teresa. Shalom, shalom. And then he commits suicide, and then it kind of sinks back down. And then here's this interview with Rob Skiba. And it was recent. It was very recent. So I listened to what this young man has to say, Nathan Reynolds. And he's saying a lot of the same things that other people who have talked about these issues talk about. That it was, his abuse started in his family when he was a very young child, and it made him have a dissociative disorder, which is split personalities, and split personalities are often a result of abuse. There was a very famous movie that was on TV in the early 70s, I think, called All About Eve, and it was the same situation. A young girl's mother would abuse her, and it made her split into 3 personalities. And then I don't remember if she supposedly committed a crime and that was her defense or not, but it's a thing. If you look it up in psychology and so forth, dissociative disorder is a thing, and people do it usually as a result of horrific abuse. So he talks about that. Nathan Reynolds talks about that, and he talks about his rich and powerful family, and he was used by them. And in the book, we bought his book, because I thought, all right, well, I can't just base my opinion on this matter just by hearing this one interview. So I bought his book, and I read through it last night about halfway through. And I just want to say up front, he seems to have changed the course of his life from whatever things were happening to him as a young man. He met a woman, she was a Christian, he came to Christ, he got deliverance, and he has, I think they have 2 children, and maybe she's pregnant with a third. He actually has his own channel, because I checked that out too, just to see, you know, what kind of videos were on it. He has about 1,000 subscribers, and it appears that he has left whatever happened to him behind himself, and now he's walking with Yeshua. And he also calls Yahweh Yahweh, and he follows a messianic person who was a rabbi called Zev Porat. So he probably knows a lot about the way and keeping Torah and so on, which is great. I don't have any problem with that. I think it's wonderful that his life turned around. So that part of it, and I wish him well. I really do. I don't have anything, you know, negative to say about him as a person now. His videos and stuff, he seems like he's now a happy family man. But on the Rob Skiba, Nathan Reynolds video, I made a comment, and I said, everything he said must be researched. And if any of what he says is true, and it's the same thing as Jeffrey Epstein, and it's the same thing as other people saying about how these rich elite people are, that needs further investigation. Now, when someone is horrifically abused, like he says he was, and it was someone in his family, which is normally who it is. It's normally not someone who is satanic kidnapping a stranger, although that happens too. And I've had personal experience in California around the Halloween time when my kids were small, that a person came on the fort where we were living and was trying to give little children a ride to school in the days right around Halloween, and it was not someone from the fort, because when you're on fort, cars have stickers and things that are for military people. So yeah, that was sort of a weird happening. And if you study Satanism, they have high holidays just like the Lord has high holidays. And on those high holidays, they want to do sacrifices and weird things and dance under the moon, whatever. So I've personally had a brush with that kind of thing. So I'm not just making that up. Anyway, he claims it was his grandfather who abused him, and his father was complicit, even if he didn't agree on it. And his mother was the kind of person who just kind of ignored it all and said, "Oh no, everything's fine." So it's likely that at least that part of his story is true, that his grandfather was the person abusing him, and then he posted a few pictures of himself in his book as a young man. And they don't look normal. They don't look like normal photos of a child. And one, he's got his hand all bandaged, and another, it looks like he has a black eye. And then in a third one, it looks like his grandfather is holding him onto the floor. And it just seemed like a very strange picture. So that, at least, is probably true. And then he says he has scars all over the place. Hey, shalom over the bus. So that's something probably that can, there's probably pictures of him or someone who would say, yeah, I've seen him and he's all scarred up. But there are things in his book that just are not true. And they're not even close to the reality of truth in areas that I have personal experience. And one of them is the military life. Pastor and I he was in the military for 20 years, but I was married to him that whole time. And so we've done 20 years in the military. Teresa, thank you. And one thing he claims that cannot be true is that he went to Fort Knox, and that's where the military, when he was 17 years old, which if you know anything about the military, you can't enter the military until you're 18 unless you have a written approval from your parents. And you have to get that from a recruiter. And he talks about going to Fort Knox and hooking up with Fort Knox professionals, and then they take him and use him as an assassin. And he also makes claims that in his young teen years, he was working for the Air Force and NORAD as an assassin and so on. And this stuff, it's just not true. The likelihood of that actually happening is like 0.5%. Shalom. Sandra, nice to see you. If you have any questions, Sandra, I'm online now, so you can ask them about basic Torah. Right now I'm talking about Rob Skiba and Nathan Reynolds and an interview that they did recently, and just looking spiritually at the things that have popped up in the news. So this Nathan Reynolds' book, he makes that claim about Fort Knox. Fort Knox is a cavalry fort. It's not a secret special agent place that people go in the military. So everything he says about that military stuff is not true. And he also says he has a personality, one of his split personalities, that can weave material that leaves no digital imprint or cannot be digitally recorded or something along those lines. Yeah, highly, highly unlikely. Some of the things he talks about with weaponry, firearms, knives and stuff, kind of iffy. You can talk about that stuff in generalities and you may know what you're talking about. But if you get into specifics about things like that, I know something about those things too, and I don't know. So he is definitely not telling the truth about some of the things in his books. And again, like I said, his abuse probably was true, but then I think it caused the dissociative order in him, and then probably those personalities he just spins off. I won't say it's pathological lying, but schizophrenia more than likely, and so he makes up things, realities that just couldn't have happened. He also talks about the military programming him in the Omega program or the Delta program to actually kill himself, and that he shot himself and stabbed himself, which is not true. The military doesn't name programs like that, and the military, that's just not the way stuff like that happens in the military. So that is not true either. Now, he may have done self-harm, and self-harm is, another thing of mental illness, could be caused by depression or delusions or schizophrenia. So, off topic. Did you keep a kosher? Do you keep a kosher kitchen with the following of Torah? This is very complicated. Hey, Bruce. Shalom. Okay, Sandra. And okay, I will get. Can be very good liars, lying to themselves where those lies are true to them. Right. And okay, we'll get back to that. Sandra, a kosher kitchen is not a requirement in Torah. That's why I keep telling you, because you ask a lot of questions, which is great. You need to read these things for yourselves. A kosher kitchen is a requirement of the Jewish belief system, and the Jewish belief system does not strictly follow Torah. You can be a secular Jew and not do anything biblically related. You can be a Reformed Jew and only do part of it. But kosher, the whole concept of kosher, is that the food and the surfaces and the utensils you use and everything else have been inspected by a rabbi, and that they follow rabbinical and Torah rules for cooking food and so on. And all the Jewish requirements that are under Talmud and the teaching of the elders and everything else are not in Torah. And I explained that in one of my other videos. Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, are the instructions that God gave us. And the Jews had that generally, because this is a little bit more complicated topic, but they had that generally. And when the whole body was captive of the Israelites, and they were taken into Babylon, that's where they start getting all these weird influences, and the elders, because there were elders. It talks about Moses having, a group of 70 elders, and they would all decide Torah issues, and only the most important issues would come to Moses because he was a busy guy. These elders started writing down and passing orally their decisions on different things, and then they made them a requirement to be a believer in Yahweh, and Yahweh never said that. He never said you have to follow all these other rules these guys are making up. And if you look in Mark 7, 1 through 13, there's a case there where Jesus is in the market, and the scribes and the Pharisees are challenging him because his men don't eat with washed hands. And we're not talking about washing with soap and water. They're talking about a ceremonial washing that the elders, require, and Jesus takes them to task. And he says, your traditions of men make vain my Father's word. And that's his way of saying, my Father has some requirements, you're supposed to be doing them. Instead of that, you're doing your own requirements, and now you are misled. Okay, that's just a very simple way of saying that. But go check out those scriptures, Sandra. So if you follow the way, which is the way the apostles and Jesus lived, you are not required to keep a kosher kitchen. Now, having said all of that, you are required to read in Genesis and Leviticus and Exodus and so on, but it's mainly in Genesis, unclean foods versus clean foods. Unclean foods are foods that the Lord himself says, don't eat these things. And just for you, because it's a general thing, you can go in the Word and find the specifics yourself. Most unclean food are things like carrion eaters, bottom feeders, things like cockroaches, and predators. You're not supposed to eat things like eagles and mountain lions, and you're not supposed to eat things like vultures and shrimp and crabs, because they clean the bottom of the ocean. They're picking up other people's droppings and dead animals, and they're eating that. And the Father wants you eating foods that aren't filtering the filth from the rest of the world in your body. And so he gives you, very specific instructions on where you draw the line there. All right, so let's get back to... I just watched part of the video. She's referring, had to turn it off. Vexing. Brother Matt. Very time consuming. Yeah, it is, Sandra. And don't put so much pressure on yourself. because you don't want it to be an unpleasant experience. Just ask the Father and the Holy Spirit to help you make clarity out of what you're reading, and don't make any conclusions until you get absolutely finished. Because I remember in our walk, we were so worried about, we got to remember every single law and how the priests do things and what goes on in the temple. And then when you get to the New Testament, you realize Yeshua did away with all that. And so you don't have to know every little thing. It's much more important that you get just things that are specific to you, and the generalities. Thank you. All right, so no pork. Right, Homestead Jesse. No pork, no bottom feeders. A mountain lion will generally not eat carrion, just stand on. No, but it's a predator. And so the Father doesn't really want you eating predators. And I'm not sure if it's because they eat other animals that are unclean, like rabbits. And now, you're eating basically what ate the rabbit, probably. Shalom from Israel. Hang on. God's garbage men are not food. Right, Grandpa the Gray. Exactly. Moshe. Shalom USA from Israel. Shalom Moshe. Hello Miss, the Prepper Frog. Hi everyone. 43 watching, only 10 likes. Come on guys. Miss here taking your time for us. That's very sweet. Thank you. Okay, Brother Matt. So you went and saw the interview. It's hard to watch. It's pretty graphic. And like I said earlier in this live stream, I'm pretty convinced just by how he talks and what he talks about. He was abused. He probably was very abused. And as Okie Storm Chaser said, people who have that experience often can have a problem with lying. And I think it probably comes from creating the other personalities, and then the other personality has their take on the world. And I'm not going to fault him for that. He's not the only one who's done that. And he does talk about Yahweh. He talks about how Jesus saved him and brought him out of the darkness of his earlier life. And I want to leave this live stream in that when people make these claims, I think they're telling the truth. I think people do get abused, and I think it's one of those things that some people probably think they get some kind of power from that, some kind of control, and it's one of those kind of, if you were abused, you have to kind of make that decision strongly that you are not going to do that, or if you don't take that decision, you're going to wind up kind of being an abuser yourself and so on. And it's not, I'm not even saying it's, only people who are abused have these issues, because all of us are sinners and all of us struggle with things. If you have alcoholics in your family and that's what you're brought up with, unless someone tells you that's a problem, you will more than likely become an alcoholic yourself. Luckily for people nowadays with the internet and so on, you can hear from someone else, hey, being an alcoholic's not a great thing. And there are ways for you to help yourself. And all it takes for you to change your life and become something better and different is for you to decide you want to. All right, let's go back to the comments and see what's going on. Bears will eat carrion. Other predators will not, like humans. Right, and bears are omnivores, actually. They're not strictly carnivores. They are omnivores. Making up an alternate life and imagination to distract from the pain and the sufferings and the guilt. Exactly, Brother Matt. And he talks about he got deliverance. And there are people, he says in his book that he followed, and I went to each of their web pages and read about them, and I'm not going to go into who they are. It's probably not someone that most of us know, but they're out there. And about half of them, I would say, are hucksters and shysters, and I wouldn't have anything to do with their ministries. But the other half seem people who are at least sincere about trying to improve their lives. And the one guy, the rabbi that I mentioned earlier, probably taught him about the way and Torah, so that's a good thing. And another person, I went to his website and I thought, well, I don't know if I would 100% believe in this guy, but he delivered him. And deliverance, if you guys don't know much about it, is something that Yeshua and the apostles did for people who were being influenced by demonic spirits. And you can, I mean, there was the little boy and his father comes to Yeshua and says, he throws himself in the fire and he throws himself down on the ground and he hurts himself. Can you please help him out? And recently, I don't know if I read it in a comment or if I read it in the Bible, there was a guy named Philip. And Philip was casting demons out, and the demons were making a lot of noise while they were being cast out. So I think the guy's name was Russ, gave this Nathan Reynolds deliverance from these evil spirits. And that's a huge part of healing. It's a huge part of healing from the kind of things that this guy probably experienced in his life. And it's also something, it's a gift that believers can give to other believers. Apostles are relieving people who are under the influence of these spirits. Yeshua is relieving people. They come to him and they're miserable and they want to be released from this. And so someone did that for Nathan Reynolds, and I think we can stop talking about him. I think we've discussed it enough. He seems to be following the way. He seems to be a happy family man now, and I'm glad for him. As far as, his family having all this far-reaching influence, if you have a lot of money, you do have a lot of influence. And you can have people in your family who are evil and people who are good. And he talks also about some place called Lake Havasu and the London Bridge that's out in Arizona. It's some sort of resort, and I thought, I've never heard of that. I'm going to research that. There is a place like that out there. There's a London Bridge you can go see, and it's hotels with resorts and pools and everything else. So that's true. Now he claims that all these rich people, rich evil people go there and they have these conferences and they give each other information about how to abuse people and control people and everything else. That part, I have no idea if that's true or not. But the fact that Jeffrey Epstein got arrested for this sort of behavior, and this young man is making the claim that his family was involved in that kind of behavior, and Jeffrey Epstein was seen talking with Prince Andrew and la 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 la. I think there's more to study there. And I think it's as much a spiritual issue as it is a legal issue, because Nathan Reynolds makes the claim that these evil people and these elite people make agreements with dark entities, and that is part of what fuels them in carrying out that kind of behavior. So I think as a believer, you want to be aware of it. You want to be able to rebuke it if somehow it comes around you, and you never, 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 never want to allow a grown adult to have access to your children in an I won't say inappropriate way, because it's not going to appear that way. But a total stranger who wants to spend a lot of time with your child, not with you, is something that you should be aware of and suspicious of and be like, no. Especially adult males to any small children. Because to a normal adult male, children are not their forte. They're not the kind of people who want to spend 5 hours with a bunch of, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. And the same thing with the woman. Like, you don't allow a strange woman to say to you, like, hey, I want to take all your kids to the pizza parlor or whatever, and you haven't vetted her and met her and all that stuff. Just be aware that it's out there and be ready to rebuke it. Okay. Northwest Arkansas Prepper. I believe they make those deals with the devil. They certainly make a deal with somebody. I mean, I can't believe that anyone can have that darkness of their behavior with not also having the spiritual darkness. Sheepdog Patriot, welcome. Mad Kel, welcome. If you have any questions, please ask them. I buried everything so deep I didn't remember it all till I was in my 30s. So Torah Traveler, you were one of those people? Mekat Shalom. Torah Traveler, the personality. If there is an order in laws, it means first is more important than second, and so on. Yes, I agree with that, Moshe. Angela Nadeau, sorry I'm late. No problem. Making up an alternate life to strive. Okay, so we've got that, yes. Torah Trailer, I buried everything so deep I didn't remember it all till I was in my 30s. Yeah, that happens a lot. People bury it because it's so unpleasant, and then it kind of rears up, and then they're not sure what to do with it. But don't hang on to it. her dad. Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry. That's another thing I tell people. I'm not an expert. First of all, I'm not an expert. I tell you things from my experience and what I've noticed. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychologist. You can't pick your parents. You can't. Your parents make you, and you have no choice in that matter at all. And so some people get born into families with great parents, and some people get born into families with not great parents, and some people get born into families where the parents are abusive. Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, could be all, could be just one, could be another. So you kind of have to forgive yourself for if you bury it and you don't want to remember it. You have to forgive yourself for not trusting that person and not wanting to have anything to do with that person in your life and cutting them off. And eventually you have to forgive that person for being imperfect and having the faults that they have, because people are just human. We cannot expect them to be perfect. And so my family, I didn't have a perfect dad either. He got drunk, stinking drunk at times, and he was not physically abusive to me, but it was disturbing as a child to see him in that kind of way. But you have to understand you're not perfect either, and you have your faults. And yeah, some people have faults that are way more serious and more harmful, but in the end, you don't want to hang on to any of that. You really don't. Even if it's in your past, when you accept Jesus, he wants you born again. And you guys, I know you know, Moshe, I didn't mean they were forced to make the deal. They had full choice. I just meant they were willing to make the evil choice. Exactly. Even the crap things my dad did taught me things, Westhold Forge. Grace, Country Frau says Grace. Yeah, I mean, Westhold Forge, that's one good thing that can come out of it. You learn things, but the other thing I'm trying to get across, and I haven't said it strongly enough yet, is become a new creation in Christ. When he says his burden is light, that's part of what he's talking about. He's talking about you become a new creation. You are born again. And so you don't continue to live in the past as that person who had the bad upbringing or the bad parents or were poor or had a brother who beat you up, or you just never had enough. You were always hungry, or you didn't get new clothes, or whatever it is. You don't live there anymore. It talks about if you believe in Yeshua, you die and are buried with him and you resurrect with him. That's part of it. Let that part of your past be in the past. Don't carry that around with you. And then start to explore being a new creation, because you as an adult get to build yourself who you want to be from the ground floor up. And so even if there's horrible things in your past, you don't have to be a horrible person. You do not have to commit the sins of the generations behind you. Divorce yourself from all of that. Just rebuke all of that and be like, no, I don't care. I don't care that in the past, my family were drug dealers or whatever. That's not going to be me. And walk in the way of following Jesus and Yeshua and be that new person, because you have all the power of Yahweh and Yeshua behind you. And you can do amazing, miraculous, wonderful, loving things for other people in that walk. That's kind of the point I wanted to get to. When I got sober, I had to forgive them, not for them, but so that I could be free of that. His burden is light. Part of it is striving to live by his instructions and thus reaping the blessings of faithfulness. Exactly, Lena K. Following him, we are promised a life of peace and quiet. And isn't that really all we really want? It's just that shalom to be reigning in our life. Yeah, that's kind of the whole thing. And I'm hoping that's what Nathan Reynolds achieved, because it sure sounds like in his book. Amen, Torah said. All right. Evil never comes with an evil face. That's why good people can easily fall. It's true, Moshe. It's true. Um, it's very seldom evil takes the form that you see it in a movie where it's so obvious. You know, they're the person wearing the black clothes and, you know, they have dark circles under their eyes and whatever. It's often, you know, as we talked about, people in your own family, people that are supposed to love you and take care of you. And because they weren't loved and taken care of, they're unable to love and take care of you. And I want to say, coming to know Jesus will straighten someone out, but even that's not guaranteed. Because there are plenty of people with problems in Christian churches. And I think it's not until you get Torah and you start seeing in black and white, yes or no, I can do this, I can't do this, God will not bless me if I do this, that it makes the pathway more clear on how to attain that peaceful, quiet life. All right, let's see what else is going on. My troubles are now of my own making. If I still blame them, they have to change for me to be okay. If they are mine, I have the power to change. Exactly. Everyone has the power to change. And you should change. You should change for the better, because you only get one life, and you're not going to be able to rewind this one. And so make the most of it. That's a message I did in a lot of my videos probably a couple of years ago. You know, you get one shot. And we hear that. People talk about it. But the reality of it, again, because when you see movies and things like Benjamin Button and these movie stars who appeared to never age and all that, gives you a false impression. Make wise choices. That was in a Freaky Friday movie, and that was one of the best lines out of that whole movie, and many movies, is make wise choices. Make your pathway less troubled. You know, don't continue to put stumbling blocks in front of yourself and to be veered off to one way or another. You know, keep your eyes on the prize. My troubles are okay. To put bitterness on the altar and never visit it again is spiritual and physical healing. It will make you ill. It is liberating. Exactly. And there are there are three things that often cause many, many other problems in a spiritual way. Bitterness is one of them. That's going to tear you up, first of all. But it's not, again, that's not the joy that the Lord promises. That's not the joy that Jesus died for. It's not the joy that Yahweh wants you to have in your life. Rebellion. And man, is that a huge thing in America, at least, Moshe. I don't know if it's that way in Israel, but here, everyone's supposed to be a rebel. Everyone's supposed to not follow rules and only their own mind. And actually, that is the creed of the Satanic Church, is do whatever you want. And so rebellion is another one of those things that, in the long run, is not going to really bear much fruit. I mean, there are certain things to be rebelled against, but everything is not to be rebelled against. Bitterness and unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is another one of those things that is going to tear you up. It's just going to make you bitter, and it's hard to bear any good fruit that way. It's way easier to bear good fruit, like long-suffering and patience and loving kindness and so on, if you're not burdened by these things. Who demanded Christ be crucified? Oh, that's right, it was the Jews. Blackie. It's true, but there's a whole lot more going on there. First of all, Yeshua himself says to Peter, you cannot stop me, and this is my paraphrasing, you cannot stop me from being crucified, because it is part of the plan, and I have to go through with it. And if you reject that, then I'm going to reject you. So it was part of the whole picture. He accepts to become the sin offering for everyone who will believe in him. And that is set up, that is a model from the Torah. You have sin offerings that are goats, and pastors would be better at the exact holidays and so on. I think it was Atonement, where they took the two goats, and one was a sin offering for the body, and the other one was a sin offering for I can't remember exactly, but one is killed and one is set loose, and all the sins of the community are on that goat that's let loose. He becomes that sin offering, and he does it willingly. And so he's actually fulfilling Torah when he is slaughtered, when he is killed. And so without that, we would still be under that temple system with those priests and be having to do the yearly sacrifices and taking in a bull and a goat and some grain and some wine and so on. David Woods from Acts 17 Apologetics made a video the other day where he lists all of the difficulty he has been facing in a humorous way. He speaks about breaking the generational curses in his family. Exactly. That's part of the deliverance. There's even deliverance manuals that talk about all of that. You break all those curses, you tear down all the strongholds, you divorce yourself from everything that your family did in the past so that you're not reliving and carrying on all those things. The other thing about the Jews demanding Yeshua be crucified, there's a political thing going on there too, because they're under Roman rule. And the elders and the scribes and the Pharisees have their setup of their Talmudic rules. And these Talmudic rules are not in the Bible. They're not in the Torah. They are extra biblical. And they're pretty happy with that situation. And they also had other messiahs come. They talk, I don't even remember which book, it might be Acts, they talk about, there was a guy and he was the Messiah and he had like 400 followers and they caused a bunch of trouble and then, they had him crucified. Gotta go take the kids to work. Shalom, Adkel. All right, shalom. Be safe. So when Yeshua shows up, it's like, oh, here's another one. Here's another Messiah. And in their minds, what they were expecting this Messiah to do was to overthrow the Romans and set up their own country so they could have their own rule. But Yeshua says, I come but for the lost sheep, none but the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And his teachings, if you look over them, with a spectacle or whatever, he's always disagreeing with the leadership. The elders and the scribes and the Pharisees are constantly asking him questions like, this woman has a husband and he dies, and so she marries the brother and blah, blah, blah. Who is she married to in the afterlife? And Yeshua's like, this is not a deal. In heaven, there are no marriages. People just worship the Lord. And so it's not important. And they're doing that because they're trying to get him to say their way of ruling and their rules and everything else is okay, and they're not. And he's trying to tell them, no, get back to my Father's rules. And he's always quoting Scripture to them because the New Testament wasn't written when he was there. So he's always trying to redirect them back. And Mark 7 is a really good example of that. But you look at any of the things. When they're walking on a Shabbat and they pick corn out of a field and the scribes and the Pharisees are like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be, that's work and blah, blah. And he just basically tells them, remember when David ate the showbread right out of the temple? Like when you're hungry on Shabbat, you can feed yourself. You're supposed to prep and have the food ready, but you don't need to starve on Shabbat. Or they would give him garbage for healing somebody. Oh, this guy was blind since he was born, but this Yehu, Jesus, he worked on the Shabbat and he healed that guy. We need to stone him. And Jesus would say, is it good to do good on the Shabbat or to do evil? Because his whole point was, your rules are not my Father's rules. If you love me, keep my commandments as I have kept my Father's commandments. He's trying to get everybody back to just the basics of Torah. That's all he's trying to do. And he's doing it because his people, their people, the bloodline people, and those who followed them out of Egypt have strayed way off until these teachings of these elders. And so they're angry at him because the crowds love him, and he's winning people over to his side, and their power base is being crumbled. And so they don't actually kill him, but they go to the Romans, who are their overlords, and they're beholden to these guys, and they're supposed to keep the peace in their part of the town, and this Yeshua guy's got these crowds and everything, and they tell the Romans he says he's a king, because in Roman law, Caesar's the only king, and you can't say you're Caesar, and that's how he is crucified. So technically the Romans killed Jesus. But it wouldn't have brought about salvation in the way that we know it if is his gift to us of our sins to be forgiven, and we do not have to have the death sentence, because so much of Torah, there was a death sentence for everything. And he has taken the price. That's what redeemed means. He has paid your price for your sins, and so you can be forgiven of them, and you don't have to be stoned outside the camp for them. That's his gift for us. All right. There's been so much breaking in my bloodline: mental illness, severe alcoholism, homosexuality, witchcraft, etc. Good. Lena, get rid of that stuff. You don't need it. All right. Moshe said, I may be late, but I didn't miss out. Sergeant James, good to see you. Carrie Thompson, Shalom, does anyone have any land I can live on with my animals on my 30-foot tank? Carrie Thompson, I got your email today, and I need to know if I have met you before. You should study Talmud. It's oral Torah. Without it, you don't have Torah. Moshe, I don't agree. We have Torah already, and we watch it. Oral is what Yeshua preached against. The elders and the scribes and the Pharisees and all the rules that they put down are not Torah. They were not God. The only one who can make commandments is Yahweh. The elders can't. And the Christian church wants to say Paul is putting down scripture. He's putting down doctrine for the belief system, and he's not. He's doing commentaries on what's already there. And Yeshua is very plain in his teachings when he comes. He's trying to get everyone back to Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Nothing else. That's why at the end of it, it says, don't follow any other extras. But I'm saying that, Moshe, that's my opinion. I'm not saying you can't have your own opinion. You absolutely can. We all have free will, and we can all form our own opinions. So I don't want you to think just because I don't agree with you means I think you need to stop talking or whatever. Amen. Brother Scott Tobia knows me, and I talked to Sister Nina and Sky, David's wives. David Burdett. And I talked to Sister Nina and Sky, David's wives. Is that Brother David Burdett? If you don't read Torah, you will not understand Paul. Exactly, Torah Traveler, because Paul, without Torah, seems like he's the one making up the doctrine. Trying to decide if the guinea fowl are agreeing or disagreeing with this wonderful discussion. They're definitely saying something, though, aren't they? Skype? ? I understand, Paul, Angela. Which holidays begins living outside undercover and cooking by fire? When does it begin this year? Just Dano. Sukkot starts on the 13th, right, Pastor? I don't think he's in there listening. It starts on a Sunday around the 13th. September 29th is trumpets. 10 days after that is atonement, and I think that's a Tuesday, and I think it's like the 8th or 9th. And then 4 days after that, which is that Sunday, is when Sukkot starts. I respect that, Miss. You have great spirit, so it's all good. I just love studying Talmud. Moshe, there is I think it's a fruitless endeavor, because in Matthew 23, Yeshua pretty much slams the elders and tells them that you're going to go to hell, and people that follow you are going to follow with you. It's whatever. I mean, I'm going to stick with Torah, and I have found peace with that and with Yah. but I can't say that I haven't read other books. I obviously read history books and I read novels and all sorts of things. So, what else? Is there anyone doing a feast around? Oh my gosh. Can't wait for Sukkot. Come on. Is there anyone doing feasts around Ava, Missouri? I've only been alone. Yeah, there's a whole congregation around Ava, Missouri. Hang on, and I'll get you the name of it. Pastor Mike Peebles is the one who runs it, and they're probably doing Sukkot. Let me ask Pastor. What's the Ava, Missouri church name? Congregation Echad. Okay. It's in Dogwood, Missouri. It's right outside of Ava. It's called Congregation Echad, which is Echad. And the pastor's name is Mike Peebles, and they are a Torah observant congregation. So, Carrie Thompson, you will want to look up their website, Congregation Echad. All right. Yes, he did. If you are living near that area and are okay communicating with me, I would love to hear about Ava as a place to live. Okay? I've been to Ava. Ava's a gorgeous area. There are many believers down there. Like I said, Congregation Echad they have like a church building and everything. And they were, last time we had anything to do with them, they had about 100 people who came to their service. There's also believers in the area who were meeting around in a park, but that's not specific enough information. Just know that Ava, Ozark's brother Jerry is a friend of ours who lives in that area too, and he's a Torah keeper, and he has his own YouTube channel. So if you go to Ava, you will find other believers. It's beautiful here. Tom has a place on the square who helps people out. Awesome. If Jesus is king, who is queen? King without queen is not Torah. Sorry. Jesus is not the king. That's not what I said, Moshe. That is what the Jews at the time wanted him to be. He's not that. He is the lamb. He comes as the lamb, which is the sin offering. And that's why he is killed at about the same time that the lambs are killed on Passover. I study Torah daily and never have read the Talmud, but if I ever find one for free, I would read it. I read the Quran years ago, and it had some interesting things in it. Grandpa the Gray. Carrie Thompson, if not you, who would you suggest I contact about Ava? Well, just Dano, I said it. Ozark's brother Jerry. Any other questions about Torah? I mean, you guys certainly can communicate with each other and all the deals, but since you've got me live online, does anyone have any more questions? What other basic Torah could I take? Keep Shabbat. Keep the Shabbat. That's one of the first commandments. The Father keeps it. He works 6 days, and then he rests on the 7th. It's set up in Genesis. It's not one of the commandments that's brought down when Moshe gives them on Mount Sinai. And it's all about resting. We are the bride. We sure are. What happens if you cannot do Sukkot? Haunted 55. Okay, I think there's 2 options there. I think and it might be Passover. Let me ask Pastor. I'll be right back again. Pastor, can you do Sukkot a month later? Can you do Sukkot a month later? That's just happening? Okay, so there should be no reason for you not to be able to do Sukkot. I know in America, in the Messianic movement, everyone seems to want to do it somewhere else. There's no commandment for you to do that. You do not necessarily have to travel from where you live all the way to California and spend $1,000 and do a Sukkot. You can do Sukkot at your house. You simply stay in a temporary dwelling. And like I was telling Sister Harriet, she's out there in the Middle East somewhere, and I'm sure there's nowhere for her to camp. But if you live in a house, you can just camp in your front yard. You can put your little sukkah or your tent up and sleep in that. And I don't want people to say to me, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. Yes, you can. You most certainly can. Pastor and I have done it in all kind of temperatures. One Sukkot, it was 28 degrees at night, and somehow we all survived sleeping in tents. Now, as you get older, like us, we kind of modify it now, and our temporary dwelling is not this place, it's a trailer, because we're older. The Father doesn't want you suffering, but if you are by yourself and you live in an apartment, then set up a little fort in your living room or out on your balcony and sleep in that. I gave the example of our daughter being in college and not being allowed to set up a tent, so she slept in her pickup truck because it had a cab on it. That's a temporary dwelling. You can do it. And basically all it says is worship the Lord, enjoy the feast. There's a movie called Ushpuzin on Netflix that is set in Israel, but it kind of gives the flavor of this holiday. This is a celebration. This is the end of the harvest. If you have a garden, you eat the foods that you made. You invite people over. On the deck, under the awning, exactly. 28 degrees, exactly. And there are people who sleep in colder temps. Amen. I love Sukkot. It is a lot of fun. Exactly. Some of the things that we talked about doing here, because every year during Sukkot, we used to plan activities every single day to do together as a congregation. And one day there was a person who we all did yard games at their house. And then another person had board games set up, and we would all play board games together. At our place, we would do a shoot-off, and they're on YouTube, the yearly Shofar Mountain shoot-off, and then somebody got a present. This year, there may be a swimming trip. We've gone on wine vineyard kind of tours. We've eaten out together at like a Chinese restaurant, the whole congregation. We've taken hikes. It's supposed to be a fun holiday. And so your requirements basically are sleeping in a temporary dwelling. Right. So there should be no reason you can't do it, even if you're by yourself.
Tell about our daughter doing it in college.
I talked about our daughter doing it. The temps that bother me is being outside with the bear. Then do it in your living room. Do it in your living room. Set up a fort. Yahweh doesn't want you chewed on and eaten by a bear. Right? Get your big dogs out there. Get your Anatolian shepherds out there. They'll handle that bear for you. But yeah, no, you can modify temporary dwelling to what can suit you at the time. Yes, black bears, but still bigger than me. Exactly. Black bears can be very dangerous. So don't go out there. Do it in your living room. We have some acreage here in Jersey and invite other families. Exactly, if you can do. It is a good time to congregate with other believers. You can have them come to dinner at your house. You can have a pizza night and invite other believers or even non-believers, because this is a time of year when you could have a non-believer come and let them see what you're doing and enjoy it, and talk to them about what you're doing and enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. All right, so let's go back. Let's see, Moshe had made a thing about lamb. In Peter's dream, 3 times, Yah said, kill and eat. What was he talking about? Even when I read it in context, I haven't got a... I'm not, honey. This is a woman. Okay, Torah Troweler. The key to that whole episode is in, I think it's Acts 10:28, verse 28. Peter's dream is not about the food. It's about people. And what is happening, the context of that whole vision is the apostles, because they were brought up strictly Jewish, thought it was not allowed for them to interact with non-believers. They had to only interact with other Jews, other believers. And so Peter and Paul have a discussion about that, and they're disagreeing about it, and then Peter has that dream. And if you notice in the verses that are up to the point after the sheet comes down, you see that Peter says, "Not so, Lord, I have never eaten anything unclean." That means in Acts, all right? Acts is after Yeshua has risen. So Peter is still keeping Torah after Yeshua has risen. He's never eaten unclean food. And 3 times the sheet comes down, and he says, "What I call clean is clean for you." And then I think it's verse...
He says, I see now, they're not talking about food, they're talking about people.
Right, in verse, I think it's 28, he says, "Oh, I see now, you weren't talking about the food, you were talking about people." So what he's basically getting a vision from the Lord is that he can now take this message of who Yeshua is to the Goyim, to the unbelievers, to Romans and Greeks and so on. And he immediately after that is contacted by that centurion, that Roman centurion, who says, "Come to my place and baptize us all. We believe, we want to follow Yahweh." So the whole Peter dream is not about the food. It's about people. And the Lord's saying, you can now go bring this message to everyone. That's what Peter's dream is about. I got willow trees to make a sukkah. Hallelujah. Oh my goodness. Call no man unclean, says Grandfather Gray. Exactly. The small black bears are more dangerous than the big grizzlies. Well, they certainly can be, but he says kill and eat. That's, Torah Traveler, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. He gives the example. You've got to read that whole chapter. Read the whole chapter. Go there. I think it's Acts 10. Might be Acts 11. Read the whole thing. Kill and eat. Not so, Lord, I will not eat that because I never eat unclean. Right? He goes through that. But then later on, in the verses below that, it says, oh, now I understand you weren't talking about the food. You were talking about men, about people. You don't want to just make a conclusion from half of the chapter. Haunted 55. Yes, Sister Kate. That's the thing you'll hear me say. So many people take things out of context. You can't take just one Bible verse and then make a conclusion from it. You have to read the verses before it and after it. You have to have read the books coming before it and after it. Or you get things like people thinking that dream says unclean food is now clean. That's not what it says. Unclean food is always unclean. It's not food for you. Just like a poisonous leopard frog is an unclean food. It's a frog, and people who eat frog legs would say, yeah, eat any frog you want, but you don't. I mean, you have to be commonsensical about these things too. All right, let's see. All meat is unclean in supermarkets from the time they're raised and tortured and suffered to the way they're slaughtered to idols with the blood still in it. Carrie Thompson, I think we're taking that just a little bit too far. There's a few instructions in Torah about if you kill something on your land, you spill the blood out on the ground. But that's an offering. You can kill a chicken and eat it, and you are not worshiping it to idols. And the other thing about that is, if you're a mature believer, you know that that meat is just meat. You can't, even if you sacrifice it to an idol, it's just meat. There can be no, as long as it's something like a sheep or a deer or a dove, that's a clean food. It doesn't matter what you do with it, it's a clean food. And if you're a mature believer, worship, if this thing's been, what? Okay. I'm being careful. I mean, absolutely, be a Berean on this stuff. Go back and search the verses. It says if a less mature believer sees you eat that meat and you cause them to stumble, then you have sinned. But if it's a mature person with another mature person and you're like, I don't care, I don't worship that idol, and I don't care, this is just meat, and you eat it, you are not sinning. All meat. Okay. I read, I read the whole thing. That's why I'm working on rereading the Torah. Oh, sorry. Okie Storm Chaser, I wanted to read your comment before. Please pray for me. Broke my right ankle and having a really bad go of things right now. Oh my gosh. How did you break your ankle? You did get it set, right? You've got a cast on? Absolutely, we'll pray for you. Hey, C103, good to see you. Yeah, ankle injuries are such a pain in the rear and in the ankle. I had a really hard time when I had to walk on crutches. I didn't break mine, but I twisted it, and it was so, makes everything so much harder. Can't get to the ortho till Wednesday. Are you, Shalom, Dina, are you saying you broke your ankle and you can't see a doctor until Wednesday?
To the emergency room.
Go to the ER. Call up Northwest Arkansas Prepper. He's a paramedic. He can set that thing for you. Don't know how I did it. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. How's your wife? Is she doing okay? Did she have her procedure? Yeah, that's just going to make your life miserable, Okie Storm Chaser. The blood is not for man to eat. Slaughterhouses do drain the blood out of animals. Beef hang in lockers for up to 2 weeks to age. Exactly. You don't eat the blood. That's it. And the meat you buy in the store has not been blessed by a rabbi. That's true. But it's been slaughtered according to USDA instructions. And the blood that's in that meat anyway, if you take it off the plate, is different from the life-giving blood. It's not the arterial blood. It's like the, what was I thinking? Not artery, venous blood. It's not the same. It's not the life-giving stuff. It's in the muscles. All right. Do you have any compunction about eating halal meat? I travel to New York City on a monthly basis and will sometimes buy a chicken meal. Okay, Lena. Here's the thing with halal meat. It's halal means kind of the same thing for Islam as kosher does for a Jewish person. And Pastor Joe will not eat anything that is halal because he doesn't agree with the Islamic religion or its culture, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with those people. So he will not eat it at all. If you love like Mediterranean cooked food, like Heroes and things like that, then I would look up a Greek restaurant and eat there. Because the other problem with halal is their definitions do not always follow Torah. Like, for some halal things, shrimp is okay and crabs are okay, and so it's just not to be trusted, if you want my opinion. Okay. Her operation went well. She's killing herself trying to help me while she's recovering. Oh my gosh. You guys. That is such a tough time. Because I'm sure she's in pain, and I'm sure you're in pain, and you probably don't want to stand up. Do you know Northwest Arkansas Prepper? Can he come over and set that thing? Or go to an ER. Okay, you need to get that leg way, way up in the air and ice it, heat it, and ice it. And you also, if you don't set it for like 2 days, they're essentially going to have to break it again to set it, and it's going to be kind of painful. Okay. My husband doesn't either, right? I mean, I just don't trust it, I guess is the way I'd put it. Having lived in a Muslim country and seen what their sanitary habits were, I wouldn't do it. I would go to a Greek restaurant or a Mediterranean restaurant or something like that. Okie dokie. I wanted to see Okie Storm Chaser. If there was anything else you had said earlier. I'm not going to be able to go back far enough. Haunted 55, you live in Maine? I have to go. God bless you and your family. Thank you, Moshe. He's already gone now, I'm sure. Be aware there is a moderator here. If anybody gets disrespectful, get him, Wee Tree Bonsai. Keep him in line. Do you know that the lamb of Passover was a symbol of Egyptian? ISO. I know this much. The lamb was something, lambs, kids were offered as sacrifices to Yahweh. Whether the Egyptians had it as a idol or whatever or not, whether South Americans worship llamas, it really doesn't matter what similarities anybody can find. And if it's in the Bible, I'm going to follow it. That's all there is to it. I don't really care if somebody says, oh, well, there was some cult that worshipped sheep. I don't care. The Father said, this is something I can eat. Passover is one of his holy days. The history and the details and everything match up exactly to what Romans did in the time, and the laws and the rules and just the whole thing. So Egyptians having lambs as a god doesn't bother me. Hey, shalom, Sister Kate, Leah, welcome. You came in right at the end of the live stream, though, Leah. You'll probably have to start at the beginning to get the whole gist of everything that we said. But it's good to see you. Hope everything's going well for you. Are you guys going to do a thing? Are you going to have people coming, or are you guys going somewhere, or how's that going to work? Because I know Pastor and I, we always have Sukkot here because we can. And we're getting older. We're not super excited about going anywhere. Doing my best every time I find something new. The swelling has to go down first for your ankle. When I destroyed my left ankle, it was 2 weeks before they could do anything. Ugh. Is it okay to use an automatic coffee maker on Shabbat or a microwave? That is a really good question, Tony Phipps. Okay, so, one, I don't use microwaves. I have a problem with having tiny radiation in my home. This is the way we look at Shabbat. If I pre-make something, like chili, because I made chili this week for Shabbat. I've already made it. I have boiled it or cooked it on the day of prep, on the day before Shabbat. So if I warm it up on Shabbat, I'm not cooking it. I'm simply warming it up. And that's the way we do things around here. So I don't drink coffee regularly, and what I would do when I drank coffee was I would pre-buy, like a Dunkin' Donut coffee and drink that. But Pastor, he makes coffee on Shabbat mornings, and he heats up water, and he puts instant coffee in it. So it really isn't an issue for us because we live off grid. And he pretty much does that even when we're around electricity. He just makes instant coffee. I really don't know the difference between just putting water in one of those coffee makers or taking a pot and boiling the water yourself and processing your coffee. It's probably pretty much the same thing. And so I would say you're probably just using your instant coffee maker. You're not making it's less work for you, I guess is the way I could say that. It was a Jew who invented the microwave. We'd love to have Sukkot with you guys, but we are having it with a local fellowship. I will go back and watch the stream while doing the dishes. I was making olive oregano. Hang on. And hanging lemon balm today. Heh, I have lemon balm out in my garden too. No, I didn't mean come do it with us. What I meant was, do you have any plans at all? And it makes sense that you do it with a local fellowship. I didn't know if you guys, were going to host something because, my goodness, hosting Sukkot is a big deal. It takes a lot of organization and time, and we've hosted people here before for Sukkot, and we're getting a little long in the tooth for all of that. But no, it's perfectly fine that you're going to a local fellowship. That makes the most sense. And I've got to do dishes today too. I'm just putting it off because it's so hot here. Boiling water's 210 degrees, so I'm going to wait till it gets a little cooler and then I'll wash dishes. My husband just mentioned that many of the Muslim businesses don't donate money to different terrorist groups like Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda. Lena, and it's true. I mean, if you do research online, you can find that. News reporters and stuff talk about that too. Because Muslims, first and foremost, no matter what they tell you and how they agree with you and whatever, are loyal to other Muslims first. So that's just how it is. Thanks, Sister Kate. Wish I had a local fellowship. I'll do it here. Oh, excuse me. Torah Trowler, there are believers in your area. There are believers around where you live, but I don't know how organized they are. My first suggestion would be just maybe look in your local yellow pages to see if any of them are part of a big enough group to have a page in the religious section of the phone book. Or look under Messianic churches, because there are people in your area who are believers. Let me see this. Oh, you have no transportation. Okay. Well, they may be willing to come pick you up. Sister Kate, getting older is not getting elderly unless we want it to be. Also, a baby is getting older. Well, it's just a euphemism for the fact that I have gray in my hair, and the Bible says that I'm a older woman and hopefully wise, and that I can teach good things and instruct younger women on how to be wives and moms. And there are two older women in the Bible. One of them at least saves Jerusalem from an invader by just going out and talking to the guy and saying, look, it's just easier if we don't fight each other. Excuse me. So that's what I'm talking about. I've been waiting a long time to get this old. I'm okay with it. Sister Kate, with what Yeshua said about the laws and his father's laws, doesn't it make sense that if we're hungry, we should eat, reheat, or whatever? Okay, 155. If you have no other recourse, because see, back in Torah, everyone's told gather double the manna on the day before Sabbath comes. So you are instructed to get ready for the Shabbat. And the instructions on Shabbat are do no work and make nobody else do work either. So it is incumbent upon you to be a good believer and to get something ready for Shabbat on Friday. Now, that could be any number of things. If you have bread and peanut butter and jelly, I think you can make yourself a peanut butter jelly sandwich if that's your kind of plan. Or you could pre-make them on Friday and just take them out of the fridge. I mean, sandwiches and deli, perfect stuff for Shabbat. You could buy fried chicken on the way home and eat it the next day. Like I said, I made a chili, and then I just reheated it on Shabbat, and we ate that. That was my planned meal. I cut everything up, and I cooked it on the day before. Sometimes on Shabbat, if I want to have like a pasta salad, I will pre-cook and cut everything else and bag it And then on Shabbat, I put it all together and put the sauce on it so it tastes fresh. But I don't do all that organizing and stuff on the Shabbat. Now, if you do nothing, if you're poor and you have nothing in your house that you can eat cold, you have no sandwich stuff, no apples, no crackers, or peanut butter, or anything else, and you have to buy yourself food, then you buy yourself food and you say, Father, I'm really sorry that I didn't prep, but I'm hungry and I'm eating something. Somebody sent me a post that said they travel sometimes for Shabbat and sometimes they forget to pre-plan their food and then they just go hangry. I don't know that that's absolutely necessary. So, does that make sense? I make 2 meals and a dessert on Friday. Exactly. One good thing about getting older is that your focus shifts to what really matters. It's true, and you've also gotten over past the child rearing years when, your attention is mostly on your children and what's going on with them. I happen to be partial to Deborah myself. Okay. I love to cook and try to have it simply reheat. Exactly. And we know some people who say you shouldn't even have like a potluck thing and eat it, that you should do everything cold. And, I'm off grid. In the middle of winter, sometimes I just want hot soup. Tina Foreshort seems very sensible. Thank you, Tina. My roommate doesn't understand. She goes to church on Sunday. And that's fine, Torah Traveler, but it doesn't have to be a bone of contention between the two of you. Because if you looked back at me 10 years ago, I went to church on Sunday too, and I was pretty convinced that was the right thing to do. And it took, 7 years of being in a Christian church, and my husband is the pastor, and us going through all the, the learning and the worshiping and the Bible studies and just reading through the Word and everything. It took us 7 years to come to the truth of Sabbath. And that's how the truth caught us, was about Sabbath. Pastor read the verse, he's like, I think we need to keep this thing. So it doesn't always happen right away that somebody starts to see Torah. And the Father talks about that. He says, some people, He does not open their eyes and their ears, because I think He knows their heart. And if He tried and they're just like, I don't want anything to do with it, then it's a fruitless endeavor. And so He specifically, the Holy Spirit, catches the attention of people and brings them to the truth. So the best thing for you to do is to just keep it, and if she gets curious and wonders what you're doing, then you can start to explain it to her. But there doesn't need to be a bone of contention between you two, because before you got Torah, you were probably going to church on Sunday too. Lots of people were. The Holy Spirit, you throw the seeds out, but it's the Holy Spirit who changes people's minds. When is the end of y'all's shemitah year, DNEC? It's in December. We're basing it on when we first got here to this property. Obviously, we've lived in other places, but this particular property is unique in that nobody had lived on it for 70 years, at least. And when we bought it, we didn't live on it either. So we take it from the date we actually got here, 7 years. And that's how we figured it. Ground needs to be prepared to accept the seed. Exactly, Mrs. Pickles. I had to work. I'm back. Hey, Wessel Forge, do you have any questions or comments, brother? Do the best you can with what you got. Got this from someone. Just stand it. Exactly. Oh, no, it's not. We get along fine. Excellent. She believes in all religions. That's too bad, but, I mean, at least she's not going to give you a load of guff about it. What's up, Forge? You got questions, comments? We kind of put the Rob Skiba, Nathan Reynolds thing to bed, and we're going over some basic Torah stuff. it's starting to cool down. I don't know if you can tell. I was really flushed earlier, and the sun is gone behind the clouds, so it's cooled down. I'm going to have to get in the yard. Many moons ago, I roomed with a gal for 5 years who was Moroccan. We had very different habits, but somehow we made it work. Right? And I don't think it's necessarily we have to go to guns over things, unless there is something like what could she have done that would have been the line in the sand for you? Like, set up an altar and sacrifice a rooster and whatever. I mean, there are things that Muslims do that a Christian is going to be like, nah, dude, I don't do that. And a Torah keeper like us, there are things they do. But it doesn't necessarily have to start out adversarial. You don't have to be enemies. Can you soil improve at all on shemitah? Or is it complete untouched land? I'm pretty sure the instruction is you're not to sow seed. You're not to plant anything. So we have done some soil improvement, and we've also weeded. We removed things, and we ate things that we had not planted. I mean, the way we interpreted it was things that we had planted, we don't plant. We don't harvest them, nothing. We just let the garden and things we planted rest. And so we did things like eat the blackberries and the grapes and stuff that grow every year. They were here when we got here. And back. All right. That was a quick trip, Madcap. I'm thinking of it kind of like God's crop rotation. Right? Let's hold fortune. I mean, to a certain extent, that makes sense. That, as a farmer or an agricultural person, if you're tilling the ground, and especially nowadays with people using, chemical fertilizers and GMO seeds and things, it's proven, like with the corn. They keep using the same corn, and they keep using Roundup to kill all the weeds and the bugs and everything else. And so some of the land up in Nebraska that's been farmed that way for years, the corn has a harder and harder time growing, and so they have to use more and more chemical. And the other thing about having only corn in the field, all the bugs that love corn get attracted to the field and attack it. It centrally locates it for them. And so they have to use more bug killer and more fertilizer, and the land gets less and less productive. And it makes a certain amount of sense in that way that the Father says, till this soil, weed it and do all that stuff, but then let the ground rest for a year. And what that's going to do, at least around here in a practical way, is all the plants that we let rest, like the turnips and stuff, they grew up and they threw seeds down. I had one cabbage plant. It grew up, threw all its seed down, and then it died. Well, I've got little cabbages growing up in my greenhouse from that. And things like the tomatoes that we have here. There are little tomatoes ripening, and some of them are falling on the ground, and I'm not going to do anything to it. And so next year, those things are going to come back. So there's God's crop rotation is a good way of thinking of it. I was wondering about the garden. Just thought you might. It becomes sterile soil. I've never heard of canning red bud pods. Do you have a red bud tree to collect the pea pods to can? We do have a red bud, but I have not heard of that. I was wondering about the garden. Just thought you might farm a bit. Free spirit. Glad to know your gardening reason. Laugh out loud. Yeah, I'm not going to garden free spirit at all, because gardening, planting, sowing, reaping is what is forbidden during the shemitah. You have to let your garden rest. And for them, it was crops too. I'm sure they had wheat fields and barley fields and everything. Let that rest. The things that we are eating from our garden now are things that come up every year. And there's just a few. There's onions and tomatoes. There's wild lettuce. We have sunflowers growing out there too, but we don't normally eat them. I give them to the animals. And our land, we have a lot of land, so there's all sorts of things that grow out here that we pick and eat. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Oh, there we go. All right. You can go to Wikipedia to find about green red bud pods. I don't know that they'd even have any pods on them now or at the end of the summer. Okay. We do let the land rest too. Awesome. Awesome. Free range preppers. Exactly. I mean, if we want to go to prepping conversations, we can. I mean, prepping is to be prepared, right? Be prepared for a disaster, natural disasters, man-made disasters. Just not, have your empty pantry and be dependent on going to the store every day to eat. One big part of the prepping community is wild edibles. There's lots of people who have videos out, who do classes, trainings. There are books that talk about wild edibles. And I've done videos on wild edibles. Pastor Joe's done videos on wild edibles. National Geographic. I told you guys in videos earlier this year, they came out with 2 magazines that were about wild edibles and wild medicinal plants and so on. It's a thing. Do you keep bees? No, I do not. We have in the past. The hives collapsed. Pastor was too busy to kind of do all the basic maintenance, and so we don't have bees now. I am bee friendly. I try not
all the bee stuff.
Right, we have all the bee equipment. I try not to use any chemicals or anything that might harm bees. And there are people in our area that do beekeep, and I do recommend you do it. The one time we got honey out of our hives, it was the most amazing tasting honey I'd ever had. Before that, I hated honey. I didn't like the taste at all. But the fresh honey was just absolutely fantastic. And then you find out things like you can use it to treat wounds, and it never goes bad, and just all sorts of stuff. There's no reason not to. You should keep bees if you can. Okay, let's see. The poor people could gather anything out of the farmer's fields when the land rested that grew out of the soil like wheat and barley. Grandpa the Great, also, you were not to cut everything down in your fields, right? You were supposed to leave the corners, which a lot of times people do anyway because they're too hard to get at. So that during Sukkot and other times, poor people could go and glean that food for themselves. And that's actually what... Is it Ruth? I think it's Ruth, Naomi's daughter-in-law, goes to Boaz's field, and she's out there gleaning that. And he says, oh, no. I'll have my servants gather grain for you. So, yeah. Let's see. I raised and nested masonry bees this year around my garden, as well as encourage carpenter bees. Awesome. It was easy. Anyone without honeybees can also have pollinators. Exactly. There's moths and all sorts of stuff. My sister boy kept bees and found out he was allergic to them. Well, that's kind of a problem. It's about time to eat some guinea fowl.
You got that right.
They're not the only ones who interrupt live streams, brother. Our rooster does it, the ducks do it, the dogs do it, the goats, when they're near, do it. Everybody wants to get in on the act. I look forward to when the guineas become a Shabbat meal over a fire. I could cook them in a Dutch oven. We have an LL Bean game cookbook. It was easy. Okay. There we go. All right, folks. I've been talking now over an hour. I'm going to have to get out and get to work in my yard. Last chance if you have questions, comments. Do y'all enjoy collecting any guinea eggs? When we have females, we do. We only have males right now, so we don't have any. They're smaller. I've got a video on them. They're full of nutrition. They just have really hard shells. I started 3 different gardens on different years to keep at least 2 going. Is that biblically okay? I guess Pastor's not going to comment on that. The way I understand shemitah to work, and you need...
it's not okay.
No, of course it's not. Right, it's not okay. Is that your whole land rests. So you couldn't have 3 different garden plots on the same land and rest one and have 2 others going.
It's just a dumb question.
Right. You have to have faith in the Father. He'll provide, and He will. Someone will end up giving you things, or wild things will grow for you. So yeah, that doesn't cut it. No matter how fast you're driving or how willing you are to drive through folds, them birds are hard to run over. I've never tried. He said Roger. Okay. All right. Loved your live stream, Sister Kate. Thank you. Sheepdog Patriot, thank you so much, but you didn't ask a single question. Oh. Thank you, sister. You're welcome. I enjoy having discussions. I enjoy answering questions, and also have people bring up points, because I don't know everything perfectly, and I love to have things pointed out, to think about it, and that's what is it called when you discuss? There's a word for it. I can't remember what it is. The Jews use that word too, and it's to discuss these weightier matters and come to a conclusion about them, and I like doing that. Sorry, I wasn't as active. I've been listening. I'm at work and can't chat too much. Lone Star Living, you're fine. You're fine. Sheepdog Patriot says, I'm shy. Aw. Well, don't be shy. There's no bad questions. There are bad comments, but We Tree Bonsai will erase it if it's a bad comment. And I can't believe Sheepdog Patriot that you'd make a bad comment anyway. Good talk. I learned a lot. Excellent. Thanks for the live stream. No problem, Mark. It's fun for me. I can sit on my porch and wait for the sun to get less strong and have discussions with people. I didn't drink enough water, though. My throat got so torn. Great stream today. Thank you. Just Dano, thanks for swinging by. I really appreciate it. Tina for short, you are welcome. Thank you for answering questions. No problem. Yep, still learning. It's a process. You're not born knowing it all, and it takes a while to read it and study it. Listening and learning. Yep, Michael Ryan, no problem. And feel free to ask questions on the videos too. I'm actually really not surprised, but it intrigues me that Moshe from Israel was on here. And when I looked at some of the comments he made, I thought, interesting. It'll be interesting to see if he comes back. Belle has a question. All right, hang on. What is this question? Let me see. I'm new to Torah, but my husband is not Torah observant. It is hard. Any advice? It's a difficult position to be in. And I've done teachings on this before. And again,
So has Paul.
Paul has done teachings too, Pastor reminds me. I'm assuming you're the wife. So I'm trying to think because there's a lot of information and I want to put it out in a way that makes sense and is correct. I've seen online where people have discussions and they say, um, my husband's not Torah observant, but I am. And so they go against their husband's wishes on things with the excuse that that's what Yahweh instructs me to do. And so they put Yahweh first, and then their husband, and then them. Now, in the biblical hierarchy, Yahweh is at the top, and then Yeshua, and then your husband, and then you. And it's not like he's a dictator. It's just because Yah is the originator of the belief system, and he's the most powerful, and Yeshua is his Messiah, and then your husband is the protector and provider of your home, and you are to be the keeper of the home. And I've told these women who say, you know, my husband says he doesn't want me to, or my husband wants me to put up a Christmas tree with him and all that stuff. And what should I do? I say, like, you can't just rebel against your husband, because then you are disobedient. So you can't just flat out be like, I rebel. And I did have a friend who was trying very hard. She had a diet restrictions because she was diabetic anyway, and so she was changing the food in the house. But her husband insisted that she cook him bacon, and he ate a lot of candy, and he had stomach issues after a while on that kind of diet, but she had to continue to eat like the gluten-free and everything for her diabetes. But she continued to do feasts, and taught her children the Bible and so on. And there was sort of, and they were in love and they wanted to stay married. So there was sort of an uneasy agreement there. And they continue to walk together, because Paul says, like, if you're the believer and your spouse is not, then you set a good example for them to hopefully win them over. I leave against my wishes to be pushing people away from over the bus. I have the same problem as Belle Chris says. I'm so lucky my husband is not observant, but we all have the gift of free will. Male and female, you are fully responsible for what you do, period. Exactly. So what you want to do, if you're the Torah believing person and the other person isn't, is you want to keep as much of it as you can, without causing a huge dissension, because you don't want that. You're not going to get any fruit out of like a knockdown, drag out, or big issues, or make Shabbat every week just a horrible time. That's not the way to make it work. So be as observant, Torah observant as you can, but also still honoring the head of your household. Or if you're the head of the household and your wife doesn't see it, there's two mindsets. There's teachings by two different, one guy's a pastor and the other one's just a person who does teachings. And the one pastor said, kick her out of the house, just get rid of her. Paul says, again, be the good example to her and win her over. And then the other person said, like, give her time. So there's a happy medium somewhere in those three opinions, and Paul's is probably should be considered the strongest. So as the head of your house, let's hope you've established yourself as the head of your house, even if you're with someone who doesn't believe the same way you are. You've got to make these Torah things palatable, I guess, so, to be the good example. So I guess let me do it the wife first. So let's say you're convicted to wear a head covering, because this is not a commandment, this is a conviction. Because I've seen people online say, like, I want to wear a head covering and my husband doesn't like it. So one woman, the way she approached that was, she had several different head coverings, and she showed them to her husband one at a time and said, well, is this one okay? Is this one okay? Do you prefer this one? And when he chose one, That's the one she wore. And when he told her, I don't want you to cover your hair right now, she would obey him and she wouldn't cover her hair. But when she's home alone doing the housework, then she puts on the covering she likes and she keeps her hair covered. Another wife, the husband said, you know, I want to do Christmas this year. And what I advised her was, tell him you will be there with him. You will go shopping with him, but you're not going to actually participate in it. So if he wants to wrap presents, he can wrap the presents. Sit there with him while he does it, because you support him as your husband, but you are not actually going to do like putting the tree up and putting the ornaments on. You'll be there with him. If he does it, fine. So it was sort of a compromise. Because breaking your marriage up is not being biblically obedient. Now, Paul also says, if the non-believer wants to leave, if they say, that's it, you know, I can't do this thing with you, I want a divorce, you let them go. You let them go. But if they don't do that, then try to work with that person as best you can to be as Torah observant as you can. So if, you know, he says, hey, I want to go to a movie on Saturday, you can say, well, sweetie, I'd really like to rest on Saturday. So how about if we go after the sun goes down? We go to an evening one, and then, you know, we're both doing the thing. That's one way to be the example without causing a huge amount of dissension. And the food thing is also the same. If you're the head of your house, well, again, let me do it from the woman's perspective. The one wife I knew would cook the bacon for her husband, but she wouldn't eat it. And she let him decide for the children. The Bible says that men are to instruct the children in the faith. And so if he said, let the kids have bacon, she would let the kids have bacon, but she would not eat it herself. And like I said, she would do things for the feast, and they would all participate because it was kind of fun. But your obedience to the Father, I don't think, and this is my opinion, so you can ask Pastor Joe in a comment on his videos, should not supersede the authority of your husband in the house, if that makes sense. So you do it up to the point to which he says no, and then you obey him, because your obedience to him can also bring him around. And you want to be the servant, because we're all servants. Think about Joseph with Potiphar's wife and so on. You want to be the best servant to the Lord and to whoever your boss is and to your husband that you can be, so that he says, wow, what is it about that person that I like so much? And that leads them into questioning you and finding out about your beliefs and being won over. So that's kind of a convoluted, many options, but just don't make it a huge fight thing, because it shouldn't be. Everything you do should be with concern, with love for your spouse. Women are supposed to obey their husbands. Men are supposed to love their wives as Christ loved his church, which means you're willing to lay down your life for her. So when you're the husband, and again, ask a pastor, because I'm not supposed to give advice to men, specifically not supposed to teach. I will give an opinion, but this is not the final word. I am not the final word on matters like that. I would think if she cooked something unclean, just don't eat it. And if she wants to do something on a Shabbat or something, just tell her you're not going to do it. You're not going to participate. And she'll figure it out. She'll start getting the message. And also share the word with her. Nothing convicts people more than actually reading with their own eyes what the Bible says. And pray for those people as well. Because prayer on their behalf can help their understanding, if that makes sense. Okay. Boy, that was a long answer. That was like 10 minutes long. Give her time is fair, but not your life. We all have the gift of free will. Hallelujah for your beautiful new family member. Mike Potts, I'm a member of his fellowship group, showed me the picture. Beautiful little gift. Jesse's channel. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. We went up soon after she was born and checked her out, and she's just cute, but all of my son and Naomi's kids are cute in my eyes. Every grandma is pretty much like that, aren't we? Okay. Wheat Tree Bonsai, what do we, need a video on? The shemitah? All right, you guys, that's it. I'm going to sign off now. I've been talking now almost 2 hours, and I really do have things I need to get. I cut a bunch of weeds down, and I've got to drag them over to the compost pile, and it's finally cool enough for me to go out there and work in the yard and not pass out. We need a video on discussing this spouse not following Torah. I may have one on that. It's not weak husbands, though. I'll think about it. Shalom. Shalom, you guys. That means peace, by the way. Thank you, Sister Kate. You're welcome, Belle. Pray and be a good example. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Prepping in progress. I didn't know you were chilling. Is that Kim or Steve? Shalom, Sister Kate. Shalom, Jesse's channel. Thanks for swinging by. I appreciate it. Fantastic live stream. Oh, Wheat Tree Bonsai, thank you. It's Steve. All right. I hope it made sense, Steve. I don't know if you got to come into the beginning of it, but I hope it made sense to you. All right. And it was good seeing you. Shalom, Kate. You're a sister. That's right. We're all sisters. We're sisters in Yeshua. I'm not a nun. I'm just part of the big, greater Yeshua family. Gives me things to discuss with Kim. And the other thing you can do is just go over the scriptures with her, Steve. She seems like a smart person. Just let her see it for herself. All right. Shalom, you guys. Bless you. Thanks for stopping by.